So how's it everyone? I'm here back again talking strategy and execution. Today I'll be talking with Brett Thompson. Brett is the co-founder of the Credence Institute, the CEO of Mzansi Meat Co, co-creator of Discourse ZA. He studied finance and economics at the University of Cape Town and Stellenbosch in South Africa. Brett has been the spokesperson of Meat Free Mondays and Veganuary in South Africa. He has held senior positions at beyond Carnism and ProVeg International, accumulating over 10 years of experience in the animal advocacy industry. Today we'll be chatting about nonprofits and startups, their similarities and what we can learn from each other, how they can tell their stories to an audience forever being inundated with messaging, what are some of the things that they get right and what are some of the things that they get wrong, and unpack why it's important to get it right the first time. So I'd like to hand over to Brett to share his knowledge, and we can unpack some ideas and have an open discussion. So Brett, take it away.
Okay, thanks very much for having me. It's just an interesting conversation. I think over my relatively not too long career, but it's half decent in length. I've kind of learned from some incredible people doing some incredible things. From organizations all over the world. And there's a thread which get it right, and there's a thread which sort of seem to get it wrong often. And I've also had experience with working in the for-profit sector with agencies and the like. And it's quite obvious that the similarities are, they're the same. When the ones that are getting it right and the ones versus the ones that want to get it wrong, or who get it wrong. And it's generally the folks that are looking to just sort of push something out based on trying to get an engagement or a billboard or whatever, versus the ones that actually generally have a story to tell and are passionate about it. So it's quite one of the hard things to know in the beginning for a lot of nonprofits is that if your heart isn't in it, it is going to be a lot more difficult to actually get it right from the get-go. So I think that's something to note, and I think that's where I wanted to sort of tie in from the beginning is like why startups, why startups and nonprofits are similar, because generally with startups they're begun by a couple of people who really love and know what they wanted to be doing. It's something unknown to a lot of people around the world, but they're super passionate about it.
Yeah.
And it's similar to maybe a cause area where you are super passionate about this thing. It's only a few people maybe know about pushing it out there, but you're determined to get it and grow this idea.
It's almost like a tunnel vision. You almost like hyper focused on the content or the idea, and sometimes that may obscure the overall big picture. So I think that's maybe like the lessons in this we can dissect is like obviously having the focus, but also having the awareness of the context and the relevance within the larger industries.
Yeah, I think, and particularly for like our discussion today and your like sort of general discussions is that like with whether it's entrepreneurs or activists starting something new, they have this tunnel vision which you referred to, which is it's a great concept to unpack because it's all they focus on. They're like, my product is great, I need to get it out there, or my message is true, so I need to get it out there, and because they see some of sort of the other sort of discussions about how you position that with your target audience or your consumer, etc., or the members of the public, they see that as distracting from the real need, the work that needs to be done. It's about making your product as good as possible, which is right, but also like if you're detached from what the target audience particularly wants, you're never going to be able to actually match it.
You're always going to be fighting uphill. You're always going to have the lower ground, and it's always going to make you more efforts, and you're always going to feel despondent because you're going to feel like you're never really connecting and making that sort of program that you're looking for.
And why I wanted to say like it's about telling a story, particularly when it comes if we're looking at nonprofits. I think there's the space for nonprofits to be able to tell a story that is inspiring and also educating to members of the public, and they a lot of them know this. A lot of them have this ability to say like you're seen differently to a brand or a company, and you're probably more in touch than academia with people because it's academics maybe get sort of stuck into their own their models, their books, etc. They get stuck into libraries. They don't need to like get their research out there. They just want to do the research itself. Whereas the non-profit sector is able to take that research, that knowledge, and then push it out there into the public discourse, which I think is a powerful position that you can play. And a lot of non-profits get it right. They are producing content and reports and whatnot that has influence. But sometimes it is also about, understanding that you are so passionate about something that the way that you push it out there is going to be it's going to put off a lot of people. And also is going to be not seen as, it might be seen as genuine in the fact that you really care about this approach, but like, you're not going to be seen as credible when you are going too gung-ho and saying like, this is why we have to do it. So you've got to tell your message a little bit.
I think a lot of people have to understand that when you putting your content out there, you've got a sort of target market or consumers you are talking to. And often we have this idea, but then when going out there, we sometimes get despondent because there are going to be the haters, the people who don't like it. And then that they sort of like detract from their own progress because they think, oh, this is so great. And then again, they get sort of sidetracked from their own sort of like discourse, and they get sidetracked from their own progress they're making. So they kind of like, then they start to try and like, with their main sort of messaging, they also try and like start to try and like win over and persuade the haters, the people who don't care for the product. And I think that's maybe sometimes when people come unstuck because they got this gung-ho approach, but then they're also like, oh, but we can also convert other people. I think that's maybe the biggest thing, is to like almost completely ignore what those other people are saying and be like, cool, this is not for you, we don't care, we're not going to spend time on you. And that then helps to refocus the agenda.
Yeah. I mean, that's, look, I've been involved in animal advocacy. That's sort of my bit for, as mentioned earlier, for a little over 10 years now. And how, focused we all are to try and get people to push towards eating less meat, going more plant-based, considering the interest of animals. And there are definitely folks, demographics, age groups, etc., that are far more receptive to the messages of animal advocacy. Just off the top of my head, it's like predominantly female. It's ages between 25, 36, roughly 40 maybe.
Yeah.
Urban dwellers and college, university educated. So and it's overwhelming, those numbers. Like in South Africa with our recent Veganuary campaign, it's something like 75% were female, and then closer to that demographic. So the reason why I'm saying that is that clearly those are the folks that you want to be speaking to and pushing and discussing in the beginning. But the people that will push back, the haters, as you say, are the ones that you listen to the most, unfortunately. Because if you put out a press release, you put out a press release and then 100 people like share it, and then you get one opinion piece which is negative, we were guilty of this actually. We had a very, very positive campaign with the press being very, very supportive of what we were doing. I was actually pleasantly surprised. And then we got one sort of less than favorable article in the Business Day. And that was all our focus. I mean, for a week in our campaign, we're like, look, we have to get a response out. We have to go. Business Day is predominantly not that type of readership, but we were like, we wanted to get a response. We did, but like to your point, I think there's this distraction that a nonprofit or a cause-related or a startup, or actually anyone, but like let's say in our discussion, that a nonprofit with a cause would say like, there's one or two people that have now come and said something wrong about what I'm doing, and my whole focus and my strategy shifts.
Derailed, yeah. Would you say, if we go back to the storytelling side of things, would you say that the nonprofits specifically compared to a startup, would you say the nonprofits are trying to be more of like a hero of the story, or are they trying to be like a guide to help people be aware of the issue and maybe take their own ownership of the problem?
Firstly, it's quite an interesting way of framing it. Are there any other sort of descriptors that you like? So you've got, let's say, so you said the hero, there's the guide, there's the educator. Are there other types, or was it those roughly?
I think those for now, the two main buckets I'm talking about, because some brands like, if we take a very like obvious one like Nike, they are obviously a great brand, but you can almost say like the people who wear the shoes are the heroes. Like Nike isn't a big company because the shoes aren't going to do the running for you. You have to do your own running, but it's going to say the shoes help you to get to be that's a great runner that you aspire to be. So do you see like a non-profit as someone who's sort of like leading the charge, leading the cause, or do you see them as someone who's just sort of like helping people get to that sort of awareness and enlightenment?
Yeah, I think there's sort of a lot of changes have happened in the last couple of years. And I think, I can't remember what year it was, but the Time magazine, okay, I think it was Greta last year, but a couple of years ago, it was just the protester.
Yeah.
But I think if you remember, I think there was a Time magazine cover, it was just the protesters. So like that's obviously, kind of showcasing that social change had come through this sort of unnamed, covered up face protester against oppression or whatnot. So that kind of speaks to like, it was a mass decentralized movement of people that resulted in social change, which kind of speaks to like Nike giving the shoes, like not to make such a crass comparison between a brand and a movement. But then, so that non-profit, there was no non-profit that kind of got the glory of being a hero within that story, let's say. So I think that's quite an interesting note. Whereas, and I think that's kind of the shift is towards that, and we see the social movements, whether it's gender-based violence in South Africa, the racial issues in America. Those are again driven by, it sounds like from the face of it, from a decentralized group of people making claims against authority for injustice. I think one part of it is that there is a lot of nonprofits that are leading the charge behind the scenes, obviously.
Yeah. But
they are probably repositioned themselves away from being like, hey, look at the work that we're doing. We are the hero pushing this forward, because of the fact that over the last couple of years, we've seen a sort of mass swell of people being able, like a surge, being able to get this type of work done.
Sure.
So having said that, I think it has changed somewhat, whereas like maybe 30, 40 years ago, it probably would have been driven a little bit more, particularly within the animal advocacy space that I know. Yeah. It would have maybe come directly from an organization first who would have occupied that hero space and said, let's move forward and push it. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a few things to that. I think it does also depend on what kind of organization you are. If you have the ability to mobilize a lot of people, you don't want to be seen as front of house. You want to be, you want to be behind the scenes and then sort of mobilizing folks. And then, but I also think that there's this there's sort of a descriptor there as well as like an institutional campaigner as a non-profit that is a strategist that is doing stuff again that nobody would highlight as flashy, that's really making waves in the media, but behind the scenes they're doing something quite powerful.
Do you find that's a bit more successful, like when people are more in the background, or do you think, like, in your own opinion, or maybe from your experience, like maybe like with Veganuary, we almost like empowering people to sort of like make a change in their life. Obviously the campaign is great, but it's just essentially making like a systematic change in people's lifestyles, where they are the heroes of their own lifestyle. So again, from your like experience, what have you found has been the stronger one?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I've got a lot of rain coming down in Cape Town, so I don't know if you can hear it on the mic, but I'll speak clearly. Well, I think it's one of the discussions within most animal advocacy forums, as it were, whether it's at conferences or just general discussion at organizations. I think there's essentially institutional advocacy and institutional advocacy and then individual advocacy. And one speaks to the fact that let's how do we get people to change, individuals to change, And then the other one obviously says like, well, these individuals operate within a larger like an institution or a system, which has corporates, government, public sector, private sector, and they don't have that much ability to influence on their own. So the argument is to say that like one person, me living in Cape Town doesn't have the biggest ability to change how McDonald's, if McDonald's would serve more veggie burgers, for example. So you would rather go and speak to people within the company and say, look, we represent a large group of people. We've got more clout, we've got more funding and a mandate. Like people might sort of after a while tire of trying to like get change on their own because there's no one backing them. Whereas organizations can just continue talking to institutions. So I think I would look at it because I've been involved in both. So the work that I have done has been institutional, talking to financials, companies, trying to get them to change the canteens, etc. And then also, media campaigns that was reaching out to, Joe Blob on the street or Joe Blog on the street, how it says. But so I just don't look. I think it just necessarily depends on your competitive advantage as an organization.
Sure.
So if you and I think that there is a space for both within organizations, and you can just 80-20 it. You can just find a space that, look, we are really good at institutional work, so we're going to focus on that. But doing a good press release that gets into a media house that goes to a couple 100,000 people or 1 million people, there's something beneficial to that. So I think it does sort of fall back to a strategy that needs to be consistent.
Yeah, and I don't beforehand like ad hoc. So with other people, like they obviously said they need to have like put out content and do this and that, and you're like, what stage of like the the buyer's journey does this fall into? Is it just like spraying and praying and hoping that like even if you've got a persona-based content going out there, it's like what stage of the buyer's journey or the consumer journey are you targeting? Are you wanting them to be like, oh wow, it's amazing, or you want them to actually take action? So I think maybe that's also the consideration of like getting putting something out in the press release. Maybe that's just like purely awareness, because maybe like educating someone and then asking for a change in lifestyle, maybe that's too much to digest in one sitting. So maybe again, like having that predefined strategy beforehand and knowing when you're putting stuff out and knowing why you're putting it out there, and not to get distracted again with everyone else and everyone else's opinions. Could be the more effective approach.
And I think that I think you spoke, was it the buyer's journey or where you are, and I think that's quite a where you are as an organization or a company, so a startup or whatnot. Like I know, and we are doing it with my recently founded nonprofit. Like it's this thing is like you don't want your social media to be stagnant, but there's no real there's no need to be sending 3 posts a day to 5 people. So if you then say like, I really have to ensure that I'm talking to individuals right now because I want people to know that I exist. But what you actually should be doing, because your strategy, like ours, is more institutional work, but you're trying to like play a bit of both. It really is a fool's game there. And like I think this was an example that you and I had spoken about before when I was doing a bit of consulting work. I've been doing some consulting work, and like I was chatting to a guy who's pretty new company, and all like pretty good products, food products. I just don't want to give too many details. But he just was like, I just want 5 videos. That was it. So like, and I think it goes back to that original thing. What we said is like it's tunnel vision. When you're an entrepreneur, you just like, or you've got such a cause. You're like, this is what I need. These 5 things, and that's it. Yeah. And then there was no other attempt to say like what else is going on in your strategy as a startup that you that will like make this needed for where you are on the consumer journey.
Well, I think people also think like they've got this notion, like you hear oftentimes how people they say like, when I've lost 5 kgs, I'm going to be this much better. I'm going to be running more, and like, so they'll wait for like, oh no, once I have these 5 videos, we now would have made it, and we're now going to make this progress. But I think it's the other way around. Like, you have to sort of make the progress and kind of make that systematic, or make the systematic progress. And obviously, maybe these 5 videos will kind of like make their way into it, but those videos aren't going to determine whether you're successful or not. Like, you can make 5 videos and they fall on deaf ears and they don't actually talk to the issues or the points that you want. And then now you're left high and dry after your main strategy. If your main strategy around those 5 videos, then you're stuck. Then you have to start shelling out more money around sort of baseless content again.
But I think, I mean, look, I again, I think there's this like this real chasm that's created between deliverable, which I think is super important. But then also like steps towards it, because that implies that you've done a little bit of homework and said like, look, let's use this example again. Like, you would have looked at the landscape, particularly like in South Africa with video content, and it's like, you know, are you going to be able to compete with the existing people that have got such a good hold and producing high quality stuff? You know, probably not, because that's their product. You know, your product is food or whatever, and theirs is not. So it's just like, you know, there's the video content. So like, it's very difficult to try and come at that, particularly when you're on a small budget. So I think that's also something when you are in the sort of early startup phases, and in organizations generally you'll never have the type of money that, unless you're a really big one, non-profits rather, to really get, you know, high quality content out there. So you've got to then go back to your USP and your competitive advantage. And then for a non-profit, it's going to be that story. So, you know, we've seen what the ability for people to record a 2-minute video, whether it's, I don't know, TikTok and stuff. I'm not on TikTok, but I hear that's what the kids are on.
You're showing.
Yeah, I was like, I just think MySpace, we really peaked then, and it was all downhill after that. But so, you know, you have the ability to really create valuable and engaging content there, and then, you know, put together white papers and you know, podcasts and stuff, you know, things that we're doing now. And then again with food brands, you know, that are new and just startups are new. Like, there's just, I think the startups, their story as an entrepreneur is possibly still the most inspiring, and everybody wants to hear. That's something that you should always focus on, particularly in the first couple of years as an organizer, a company, opposed to trying to see yourself going, okay, like, look, this is what, you know, famous brands is doing with their companies. We should be doing something similar. So I think you've got to focus on your USP.
Let's maybe go through some of the slides about the different brands and the different executions that you want to talk about.
Yeah. And sorry if these are all self-promotion, but it's the 3 companies and organizations that I'm involved with, and it's just purely because I just think I've got an ability to talk about them more than I would for anyone else. So I'll try not. This is not to sell, you know, but a little bit as well. A bit of background. So Discourse ZA, co-created with a buddy of mine, Ludwig Roll, and he's got a really big interest in philosophy and, you know, the bigger questions in life, and I've got more on politics and economics. So we kind of just banded together just because we got very tired with to be honest, we got very tired with the way that most issues are talked about online. It's always polarized, left versus right. You know, there's no middle ground, there's no center approach. And him and I have also quite slightly different political views, which is also quite cool. So we balance each other out quite nicely, I think. So we also noted that we have got more of an understanding what's happening in the UK and the US's political system because of the fact that their media is just so much better at bombarding us with it, opposed to, you know, the South African landscape. And I don't really listen to any South African podcasts. You know, but I'll spend time on, everybody listens to Rogan or whatever. So we just thought it was a bit of a gap, and there was a really cool, there's a cool channel that's started by Robert Wright in the US, which gets but two people who are experts in their fields to have a conversation about something. So it's different to like the normal podcast of like interviewer and interviewee for the most part. So what we're trying to achieve with the branding, to get into that, is that like it was really about something that was subtle, that there wasn't like we wanted somebody that would come across this who, regardless of their political spectrum, they would say like, this is something I could listen to. They could be center left, center right, authoritarian, libertarian, who knows. Marxists, probably. We're trying to get a Marxist on the channel, but like I'm sure we've had one already. But so it was meant to achieve that with and we wanted to use the tones, the colors that we were using, and just the font and like the logo, everything was meant to be subdued and like kind of just to say like, this is we're a neutral pad or platform rather. And it's because our biggest selling point that we want to get towards is that when individuals have arguments online, whether it's on Twitter or whatever, they could actually reach out to us, we could reach out to them, hopefully, and come on two very opposing folks, potentially could see us as a neutral playing ground. And that's not always that needs to happen, because we predominantly have people that have similar views, have unpacked conversations, but it's really it's to be able to do those two sort of things. It just really needs to be like, from the word, from the brand, from the logo, from the colors that we use, we want it to be neutral. Really, that's our goal.
Well, yeah, I definitely think you guys would achieve that. There's nothing like it's like jumping out saying, "Look at us, we are the answer to this whole problem." You guys are saying we're here. It's a neutral platform. It's a space for people to kind of chat and be open.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of you were saying there's also this notion that you don't have to be the hero in the story. You can be the guide, you can be the educator, or you can just be the facilitator, or just open up the sandbox and let the kids play, and then hopefully nobody throws sand.
I think that's one of the topics. Like a lot of companies will say like, "Oh, we are just going to be the guide for our audience or the consumers to obviously reach their potential or like realize the lifestyle they want." But then I think sometimes where things get lost is like when there's a campaign being driven, and then there's a campaign named driven by so and so, and kind of now they've taken themselves out of the light of God and the side to be the hero of a campaign, which I think sometimes is a bit conflicting. So it's kind of like, is it like, again, it needs to be focused of like, when you're making a campaign, what's the campaign goal in relation to the business or organization goal, and just make sure that, again, you're not sort of like shooting yourself in the foot or like walking into a wall by making a flashy campaign and rushing to make content, as opposed to focusing on, okay, what's the change we're looking to make? What is the action we're looking to provoke? And again, does it align with the company or the organization, and does it align with the audience whose lives to make better? Yeah.
Go back to when 2010 with the Arab Springs. Like that, we like believe that that was like a moment in time that changed the whole world. But like there was definitely work being done by a lot of people in the background, which I think we kind of touched on a little bit earlier, probably not so eloquently, that eventually led to this, like, okay, now the moment's here, boom, let's go. And I think this idea that a lot of people believe is like, if we can just make this viral campaign happen now as a brand, and actually everyone does it, it's going to go out there, like millions of people are going to see it. But if there's going to be no sort of like incremental build towards that campaign, like, that takes time, for people to change their viewpoint, I think it will be something that you just go like, oh my gosh, that shocked me. Okay, I'm now moving on.
Yeah.
And your behavior won't change. I mean, that's what I think.
That's what we believe. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, and I think like and like building up to that with a lot of the big nonprofits do this. They have like a strong institutional work that is like going from grassroots up, and at the same time they like split it up to say that we will do a campaigning which is more, you know, viral, aimed at getting more viral, getting more clicks and whatnot. But you know, I think maybe the newer folks just think like, let's just launch and explode and see what happens. Moving away from like nonprofits where there's one discussion about how they should react to issues that are outside of their usual sphere of influence, and then there's another with brands. And I like that way of how you described it as like brands who don't know how to react to something like let's use, because we live here, so gender-based values, unfortunately, gender-based violence in South Africa. And brands during that, when it was a couple of months ago when it really was going viral, and they would just kind of do that. They would be like, okay, I'm just gonna, you know, I'm gonna make a point about it, and then I think that's enough. I'm gonna lob something out there and see what it's, and because I have to. And like, I think there's just this insincerity about doing something like that. You know, there's a lot of companies, you know, definitely that have got, you know, it's in their DNA. They've been working on this. I think Woolworths is a good example on that. I hope I'm not saying this out of step, but I think they've been doing a lot of stuff within community development and that over the years. So like they got involved in this discussion from the get-go, and they still are. Whereas the folks that just were like, they just needed to say something because the CEO said, we need to get involved with this.
Yeah.
And I think that's, yeah, harmful, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we have been going well. So maybe if you want to like sum up like a final thought. So I think this,
yeah,
for more discussions and time as we sort of been noting along the way. But I think, yeah, let's sum up before we ramble on like two old men for too long.
Yeah. And definitely, hopefully you cut a lot of this in post. No, I think so. You know, from my perspective, nonprofits have the ability to tell their story in a way that's genuine. They're very unique in that ability in this modern world that we have. There's just too much information, too much marketing coming at us. They need to take on that. It needs to be genuine, and it doesn't need to be genuine because it is genuine. And there's some strategic positions that you can take, and like, you know, there's just simple things that you can do, whether it's the right fonts or like just the right colors and whatnot, so that it doesn't come across as being X or Y if your strategy is Z.
Yeah.
And I think that's a simple step that one can make, particularly with a startup. When you do it, and why I think it's so important to do it right the first time, is that because once you get out there and you start messaging, it's very hard to change that.
Yeah.
You get stuck into your groove, you attract a certain follower base. And then when you want to pivot away from certain things, and I think how we discussed it, whether you are an educator or a guide, or you want to add something else to your string to your bow, you won't be able to change your spots, and you won't be able to change your content or your whatever it is, because you are so set on saying like, I have to achieve things through with my cause through doing shock or tactics or whatnot. And I just think that there's just so many other ways to do that. And like we touched on individual, outreach versus institutional outreach. I think both of those are important. I think you work on your competitive advantage and look at which one's which. And something that I didn't mention too much, but I'll do now quickly, but clearly there's obviously a different way of approaching those two. So if you are focusing on individuals, it is a far more consumer-friendly facing, public-facing approach, whereas institutions, it's got to be more withdrawn. It's got to be more pragmatic. It's got to be, for lack of a better word, boring, because that is real trench warfare. So these are all these things that you've got to consider into your organizational strategy before you then say, okay, well then how do I apply that to my communications and PR or marketing strategy going forward? And those are simple considerations, not simple, those are very crucial considerations that you need to make as a nonprofit. Yeah, it's been quite interesting to talk to. So thanks very much.
Yeah, I definitely obviously wish the best of luck with your sort of endeavors. Obviously, you taking on a lot, but I think you are trying to make a positive change within the community that you work in. And yeah, I think having these considered opinions and considered approaches will hopefully make the difference, as opposed to going out there and having a flashbang approach. Thinking about stuff properly beforehand does make a difference. Or that's what I like to believe. But it's for me, it's also great to hear not a differing opinion, but someone with an opinion from someone like yourself who's got a lot of experience testing the different scenarios in different instances, whether it's nonprofit or NGO or just a normal brand. But yeah,
good. Cool. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, cool.